Let's talk about backups again. Another personal story from me. Hi, I'm Charlie, your online business manager. So we talk about backups a lot, and I think it's worthwhile circling around again and just having another chat about them and having a talk about them in a different sphere this time. Not a computer failing, but a web server failing. As many of my followers will know and my viewers will know, I run a web hosting arm of my business, and I host client sites. Part of that hosting includes backing up the full web server. I don't back up individual client sites. I do back up the whole web server, which means that if something goes wrong with the web server and I need to recover it, I can go back to the last successful backup and restore that server. That's fine. Those backups are done, however, once a week, which is a problem if you are working on your sites across the week, or if you've been making changes to your sites across the week, as I indeed had on my own personal website. And unfortunately, one of my clients had also done some work one day on one of those websites, but that day was after the backup had been taken. So when I had to restore a web server on Friday afternoon due to a catastrophic failure of a piece of hardware, which meant that we couldn't just reboot the server and we couldn't just do a normal restore or repair on it. We actually had to go back to the backup for that week, redo that backup, bring it up and running, and get it active again. We lost the work that we had done that week. Now, that is a terrible, terrible thing. And I feel very, very, very bad that I didn't make that happen, but that happened. The thing is that you need to balance the the number of backups you're doing versus the utility of having all those backups. I could, if I wanted to, I could, with a little bit of work, back that web server up every day. By backing that web server up every day, I am using an awful lot of storage space to maintain those backups. I am adding extra load to the service while the backups run. And then when it comes time, if it ever comes time to needing to restore, I need to work out which backup I really need to go back to. Do I go back one day? Do I go back 2 days? That last bit, you'd have that anyway. So the balance there is, what is the likelihood that I actually need to restore a web server from a complete server backup at any one point in time to how often do I back it up, which is why we go weekly, because in the number of times I needed to do a restoration of a server from a server level backup, I can count on 2 fingers, and that's in 17 years I've had to do that. Last week was the second time, and the first time in probably about 10 years, I've actually had to do a server level backup. So what that means is that as a client and as someone who has their sites on my server, and I class myself as my own client as well, I need to make sure that I have backups of my sites running, particularly when I'm working on them and I'm making changes to them, and being stored off-site, so that if that happens, I can then go to my backup for my site and just restore those backups. I don't need to go back through everyone's site and restore everyone else's site as well, because they may not have changed. In fact, they rarely change. Most websites go up and they are fairly static. So how do you work with your hosting provider? And sorry, let me just come back a little bit on that. Most hosting providers have the same sorts of policies. They'll back up the server on a weekly basis. Their policy is generally, it is a best case scenario that they will be able to restore a backup for that server from an earlier version. From that backup. They make no guarantees. There are no hard and fast guarantees that they will be able to use those backups. There is a number of reasons behind that, and I could go into them. and I'm happy to discuss them with people if they want to if you want to have that discussion. But it all makes a lot of sense as to why those provisions are in place and why those caveats are in place. As a client of a hosting provider myself, what I then do is I run my own backups. I put Backup Buddy on my web server or on my website, and I set the schedule up to run a database backup once a day and a full backup once every week. I'll come back to that one in a minute. So the database server, the database backup will take the data that has been put onto the site and store that on a daily basis. The full backup will take up any images, any files that have been uploaded to the server in that week, and then store them in a separate file and store them off. So a daily database backup and a weekly full backup. I store those offsite. Now with Backup Buddy, and I use Backup Buddy on my WordPress websites. There are other plugins out there. I just prefer Backup Buddy. I can store them in a number of places. I can use SFTP to store them off on another web server, which I wouldn't recommend you do because that's just that's just going to give you the same sorts of issues if that other web server fails. You can put it in Amazon S3, you can put it on Dropbox, you can put it, I think Google Drive is there now. So you've got a whole heap of options as to where you can put those backups. It does allow you to email those backups to you. I wouldn't recommend it because some of those backups can get really large and they won't email. They just won't be accepted. They either won't go out from the server or they won't be received on your inbox. So you do need to, when you're working on when you're thinking about your websites, when you're thinking about anything, have a belt and braces type approach. Yes, there are server level backups. You should have a site level backup as well. How often you do those backups, whether you do a weekly full backup or whether you do a daily full backup or whether you do a twice weekly, let's call it twice weekly full backup, that depends on how often you're making changes to your server or to your website. Now, if you're doing updates to your website, like you're doing a major update, you're doing a major revamp, make sure you back those files up every day and put them somewhere that is not on the web server. Because if something happens and that server has to be restored, you are going to lose those backups. So you must make sure you put them somewhere else, not on your web server. So I am talking from personal experience here. It was a very, very stressful Friday night, a very stressful Saturday morning for me while I got all that resolved. But I did get it resolved. I did have it back up and running. Yeah, two of us got hit reasonably badly in that we lost a good day or so's worth of work from our sites because of it. So have a think about your backup strategy, not just on your computer, like I spoke about in one of my earlier episodes. Do you take your data? Do you put it on an external hard drive? Do you then back that up into the cloud? Do the same with your web server. We'll talk about doing backups on phones a little later too, I think, and backing up photos off your phone even. What I'd like to hear from you about is, what is your backup strategy? How have you handled it? What sorts of experiences have you had? And I'd also like to remind you to like this video, subscribe to my channels, and ring the notification bell so you find out when I drop more content.